I am Jen Thomas, Community Engagement Manager here at the Housing Alliance, and I am joined by my colleagues Gail Schwartz, Associate Director of Policy and Programs, as well as Erin Zappia, Senior Government Relations Manager. We are your Capitol Hill Day support team, and we look forward to spending the next 30 minutes with you. Okay. So before we get into Capitol Hill Day, I want to go over today's agenda for what we're going to do for the next 30 minutes. It is pretty exciting that after 3 very successful years of a virtual Capitol Hill Day, we are returning to an in-person event this year. So during today's webinar, we're going to talk about why Capitol Hill Day is so important, everything that we are doing before, on, and after the day to make sure everyone is prepared. And of course, we'll round out today's discussion with a conversation about next steps and open it up for questions at the end. So why Capitol Hill Day? We do need full investments from the federal government for housing, homelessness, and community development programs. And it really helps lay the foundation so that we're able to maximize all the great work that happens at the state and local levels. And we also know that when advocacy is done right and we are prepared, it really does have an impact. But before we get into details about Capitol Hill Day, we have some important policy conversations to have. So I'd like to turn it over to Erin to go over the policy priorities for this year.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So you'll see on the slide we've listed some of the basic asks that you should have in mind is to take into your meeting. $27.4 billion for Section 8 tenant-based vouchers, renewing all rental assistance, fully funding public housing operations and repairs, fully funding homeless assistance grants, providing $100 million for legal assistance, $3 billion for a permanent emergency rental assistance program, and of course, LIHTC, expanding LIHTC if they can get around to that this session. So we didn't get exactly what we wished for when we passed the December omnibus legislation, and we're hoping that the Biden administration will prioritize housing in their upcoming budget, but with the ever widening agenda, housing seems to be getting short shrift or getting lost, as Ukraine and disaster relief kind of takes precedence. So it's really our job here to raise housing as a higher priority for these members. There's, the big talk right now is the debt ceiling. And that's something that, without going into deep detail on, it's definitely not something to sleep on. Since 1960, Congress has had to address the debt ceiling in some way about 78 times. So this is nothing new, but it could be bad news for domestic spending, which of course happened in 2011 when they enacted the Budget Control Act. The makeup of Congress was a bit different at that time, but for about a decade, caps on spending really hurt housing programs. So while those caps have expired, I believe they expired in 2021, we're kind of in danger of that once again. So, I would highlight that. I would mention that in your meeting with members. Try to leave room for housing programs as Congress is negotiating debt ceiling. So Jen, can you go to the next slide? So here's a few key legislative priorities, which we feel that are bipartisan. Choice and Affordable Housing Act, streamlining and improving Section 8 housing choice voucher program, This has, as you can see, Republicans, Democrats, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, prime sponsor. The Eviction Crisis Act, which was introduced last session, being reintroduced again in a new session to provide emergency short-term assistance to help stabilize households in crisis, creating a housing stabilization fund for renters. Senator Portman, Republican from Ohio, Bennett, Democrat from Colorado, and Representative Torres, Democrat from New York. Again, a bipartisan piece. Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, strengthening the housing credit to maximize impact in communities facing the greatest need. Again, both members of both parties supporting that legislation. Okay, next slide, Jen. I think we maybe.
Yeah, thanks so much, Aaron,
Yep.
for giving that overview. I'm going to turn it over to Gail now to give us an overview of our messaging framework.
Great, thank you, Jen. So thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. And then of course, for those of you who have signed up to join us in DC for Capitol Hill Day. Again, you know, our messaging framework is pretty basic. We really want folks to stay solution focused. We know what works. We really want to highlight the point that, you know, there are solutions out there. They have worked. The challenge is that they are not funded at a scale to meet the need completely. The Housing Alliance will prepare talking points for each of the priorities, and that would be in your packets. The next one, you know, we really want to make sure that you know your representatives and their key concerns, and of course, you know, thank them for their support on key issues. Again, you know, for those who are actually going to be joining us the day of, the Housing Alliance staff will prepare you and make sure that you know who you're talking to. Are they sitting on a key committee? You know, how they voted on some of these past bills. And then also keep a focus on how federal programs will help Pennsylvanians. So, you know, it's always good to keep the conversation local. So again, you know, we're really going to do some work using, you know, our housing needs assessment, the fact sheets that Jen mentioned earlier, as well as, you know, looking at some of the other more recent data around eviction and things like that, that we know these pieces of legislation can really help our neighbors. We do want to focus on the need for federal help. We want this, you know, especially from elected officials, to help stop evictions. That will help stop homelessness and create more affordable housing. So again, you know, we really just want to make the connection of, you know, what they do in DC, how it really impacts all of us in our communities and in our everyday lives. And then keep the messaging focused to beyond the pandemic, while acknowledging the long-term and lasting effects of the pandemic, as well as the inflation that we've all been struggling with. So this is our basic messaging framework, but really just a thing to remember is, you know, for all of you who are going to be joining us, we ask that you come sharing your stories and your experiences. You know, the Housing Alliance team will definitely be there to handle all of the policy pieces, but, you know, we really do want you to talk about the need that you're seeing in your communities and in your work and in your lives. So again, our real main message is, you know, these solutions addressing evictions and affordable housing create a more economically stable Commonwealth for all of us. I'm going to pass it back to you, Jen.
Thanks so much, Gail, for that overview. So, you know, now that you've heard the policy priorities and the messaging framework, I want to review a little bit of what the Housing Alliance is doing leading up to the day. So currently we are working to schedule meetings with elected officials, preparing packets for the meetings, and organizing advocate teams based on congressional district. On Wednesday, March 15th at 11 a.m., we are going to have a planning meeting for those of you attending the in-person Capitol Hill Day in Washington, where we will be reviewing those policy priorities that Erin reviewed, the messaging framework, the schedule of the day, how to have an effective legislative visit, and individualized plans for each meeting that is scheduled. The contents of the packet that we are providing include the legislative meeting guide, the talking points that Gail referenced, all of the policy priorities, fact sheets on the various policy priorities and the county and state fact sheets, and the finalized schedule for the day. If you're wondering what information you can bring, really anything specific to your program or organization or the community needs. Right now, this is the tentative schedule for the day so far. We have 2 meetings confirmed, one with Senator Fetterman's office and one with Representative Kelly. Anything you see here with an asterisk next to it means that that's what the meeting is tentatively scheduled for, and our team is currently working with their office to get that meeting confirmed. We are also working to get other meetings scheduled, and you will receive a finalized schedule of the day once everything is confirmed with the representative's office. And I am going to pass it back over to Gail to give a rundown on what you can do to prepare ahead of time and how to have an effective legislative visit.
Thanks, Jen. So for all of you who are going to be joining us, there's, again, a couple things that you can do to prepare. You know, we don't want you to try and become a policy expert on any of these pieces of legislation overnight. What we need from all of you is to really talk about how these programs work to impact your community, to help your neighbors, to help your family members, to help you, to help the people that you serve through your programs. So we really do encourage having people share their stories more so than talking about statistics. In these meetings, stories really tend to have far more impact and will stick in somebody's memory a little bit better than the statistics. We will have information packets for the legislators that will have all of that detailed policy information, but we really, really want to put the human face to the need. And so that's what we are relying on all of you to bring to us. So again, you know, thinking about how do you use federal housing or rental assistance funding in your community? You know, what could you do if you had more resources like the low-income housing tax credit available in your communities, in your state? And again, remember, I cannot stress this enough. You do not need to become an expert on tax credit or policies or homelessness or eviction or affordable housing development. We just need you to speak to the knowledge and experience that you have. So again, that you're putting that real human face, how this is impacting real Pennsylvanians every day. Now, we have some strategies on how to have an effective legislative visit. There's going to be a team leader who opens the meeting with the reason that we are having the meeting, why we are visiting the Congress member's office. More than likely, it is going to be a Housing Alliance staff team member who will be the team leader, but in the event that a couple of our meetings are double booked, some folks might end up going into these meetings alone, but of course we will do everything that we can to prepare you for that. We'll have everyone go around, introduce themselves and state why they are there. The team leader will then, you know, whether we're talking to the member of Congress themselves or to their staffer, we will quickly go over what pieces of legislation we are asking for them to support. And then we are going to have a conversation around the issues. And that's where we're really looking for people to talk about what's happening every day in their communities, in their lives, in their work, so that the folks that we're meeting with can really understand and feel the impact. And then, of course, the team leader will close the meeting, will restate the asks, the policy asks, and then, of course, thank the staff and legislator for their time and support.
Thank you so much, Gail. So next steps for everyone on the call here today, and for those of you that are signed up to attend Capitol Hill Day, as Gail has mentioned, is really to work on preparing your story. Write down a few lines, organize your thoughts, and really let them know how housing has been foundational for you. We know that housing is so foundational for all of us, no matter where we are. So your story can discuss how housing or lack of housing has really impacted you, your neighbors, your family members, and the people that you serve through your program. Again, please feel free to bring informational materials about your organization to the meetings, because we can leave them behind with the congressperson or their staffer. We are going to be having a planning meeting again on Wednesday, March 15th from 11 to 12. Everyone who is signed up for Capitol Hill Day on March 23rd will receive a calendar invite to that meeting after this webinar. This is where we will break up into our teams, come up with plans for each meeting, the flow of the meeting, and who's going to be able to speak and in what order. Please do remember that you have to register for Capitol Hill Day separately. So signing up for this webinar did not include you in the Capitol Hill Day registration. We will be sending out that registration link in the follow-up materials, but you can also find that link on our website on our events page. If you would like us to try and schedule a meeting on your behalf, you have to be registered by the end of the day, March 10th. This allows our team enough time to reach out to the office and get that meeting confirmed. And we also cannot guarantee that we will be able to schedule a meeting with your representative. So that is the rundown of the day. And we are really excited that you all were able to join us. And we would like to open up to question and answer. Let's see. Questions? Okay, so Stephen asked, what is the trend with the foreclosure, eviction, and homelessness numbers from 2019 to date, and the impact of these programs on those numbers? Can those numbers be used on the Hill?
I'll take that one. So, I mean, I don't have the exact numbers offhand, but I can say in all three of those areas, the numbers are going up and probably up above pre-pandemic levels. We will have some of that information in the packets. And again, we will be providing that information. Many of the programs are going to impact, of course, we want to see an increase to HUD funding, and HUD funding most certainly funds homelessness services and affordable housing services. The Eviction Crisis Act, that is definitely going to support getting essentially a permanent emergency rental assistance program and eviction prevention programs going. And then HUD programming and other funds can also be used for foreclosure prevention. So, these programs are definitely going to be helped. And, we will include that information in the Leave Behind packets.
Thanks, Gail. We have another question from Marlise. They ask, our organization spans across several districts. Will we be able to go to the meetings with all representatives for our sites?
So we are working to get meetings with representatives now. We cannot guarantee that we are going to be able to get a meeting with your representative. If you are with an organization that does cover or span across multiple districts, and you want to try and get those meetings, please reach out to Jen as soon as possible and let her know what those meetings, who those representatives are that you would like us to try and schedule with. But again, we are going to do our very best to schedule as many meetings as possible, but nothing is a guarantee.
Thanks, Gail. We have another question from Beth. They ask, when you state that you know the solutions that work, are you referring to proposed acts or asks? Also, would the acts be long-term and national or state mandated?
So when, I say we know the solutions that work, it's oftentimes the programs that are funded by these, by the budget and by these individual pieces of legislation. So, I think we saw amazing impact and around the emergency rental assistance program. And so we can say that this was really, really helpful in preventing numerous evictions throughout the pandemic. And it really was impactful for all of those households who, for the most part, were doing all right, but just didn't have a rainy day fund. And so in the future, if they do happen to hit that one-time emergency, like a medical bill or a car repair bill, something like that, that there's a resource that's able to support them so that, again, this hiccup and this one-time event doesn't become a destabilizing crisis. So we definitely have that. Of course, we have numerous years and years worth of research around, the positive impacts of having access to affordable housing, impacts of how low-income housing tax credit can impact the overall surrounding neighborhoods and improving property values. So that's what we say when we know the solutions that work. We also know, housing first and other evidence-based methods when addressing homelessness. Those are also the solutions that work. Again, people who live in affordable housing for the most part do very, very well. We just know that there is not nearly enough affordable housing for all the people who need it.
Thanks, Gail. Looks like we have another question from Steve. Who are the champions and leading Congress people here in PA that we can contact to let them know what we're doing, what we're working on in regards to housing issues?
So, that looks at really committee assignments. So I think Senator Fetterman is on the Senate Banking and Finance Committee. I know, trying to think who else. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's a lot from the Pennsylvania delegation that is in the key housing committees. Aaron, beyond Senator Fetterman, are you aware of any committee appointments?
Yes. Sorry, I just lost the, I'm just looking through Ways and Means, and of course, Lloyd Smucker, Representative Lloyd Smucker serves on Ways and Means. That's a very powerful committee. Brian Fitzpatrick also serves on Ways and Means. And who am I forgetting? Let's see. We have, well, of course, we have Dwight Evans also on Ways and Means. And without question, Dwight Evans is the foremost housing advocate from the Pennsylvania delegation. So I think those, in the House, those are kind of, three members on a very significant committee. And again, with, some of the priorities that we mentioned being bipartisan pieces, it's certainly, worth advocating for those with both Representative Smucker and Fitzpatrick.
Thanks, Gail and Erin. I think we have time for one last question before we wrap up. This person says, I only know what solution has worked for me and my family and those I help. Are we looking to educate and promote homeownership for low income as well?
I mean, I think we're looking to promote, all resources that expand all of affordable housing, and that definitely includes home ownership. And I think, again, speaking to your experience is the best thing that you can do, even if, we don't have like a very specific piece of legislation that says, we're going to expand homeownership programs. Simply expanding funding for HUD is going to expand funding for home ownership programs. So again, it is okay for you to speak about whatever it is that you're working on, because that will be the most impactful thing that you can do in those meetings.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of conversations around home ownership, and people come at it from a lot of different angles. And I think part of the conversation is access to credit. And, while I can't really say what exactly does that mean, but that's something that's worth bringing up with members, both at the state level and the federal level. And the other is preservation of generational wealth, which is a huge problem. If we, look at, tangled title issues, and again, how's it being addressed? Well, it needs to be addressed somehow, right? Better resources. There needs to be a lot more thought behind it. I would, next week, this is, what we're talking about federal, but, at the state level, Governor Shapiro is going to give his budget address next Tuesday. I wouldn't be surprised to hear a bit about home ownership in that budget address. And if not in the budget address, then some initiatives coming out of the Shapiro administration in the future. So just a couple thoughts to add,
Thank you, Erin. And we are at time, so we are going to wrap up. I want to remind everyone that all the materials from today's webinar will be sent out for you to review. And once you are signed up for Capitol Hill Day, if you plan on attending, you will be sent an invite to another planning meeting on March 15th, where we can dive into these things a little deeper and really prepare your story. But with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today and for signing up to advocate on Capitol Hill, March 23rd. And please reach out to us if you have any questions. Bye, everyone.